Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for the patience. And now we're going to start the talk. I'm super excited to have you here. We also got to know that there were a lot of registrations as well, and a lot of people were interested in basically looking into what I have to say. And that is absolutely exciting and amazing. Awesome. I see Lee, Fang, everyone. Cool, cool, cool. Thank you so much for joining. So today, let me actually make the environment a bit cooler. So how open source changed my life, and that is the topic for today. But I'm gonna actually start with a story. In 2016, something really happened. When Angular 2 was being revamped completely from scratch, and a lot of people have been working with Angular 1 or Angular JS as we call it now, they were a bit shocked. They were also super nervous as well. They were confused. And I was one of those people. A lot of people were just sad. Why? Because they spent a year or two learning something that is now just going to be nuked. It's not going to be there. And then people were afraid that their skill set is just gone or is outdated. But a lot of people were really excited. And I was actually one of the people who were excited because of the things that I saw being improved in Angular. And working with Angular for so long, I needed those things to be improved. So one day in 2016, I was at a conference in one of the prominent universities in my city, Karachi, and the university is Muhammad Ali Jinnah University, or we call it MAJU. There was an event happening. The event was ng-conf, and actually ng-conf extended, where there were a lot of people, about 100 developers, just there looking at a screen of people in America talking about Angular. It was both crazy and interesting, but the fun part was we also had some local developers who were prominent and they were giving talks as well. But the majority of it was just us viewing the live conference together. And that was really cool. And I was there. At that time, I was basically a nobody. Nobody knew me in the conference, almost no one. There were some friends that came with me, or I convinced them to go to the conference, and there were some people that were from my past workplace. But essentially, nobody knew me, unlike today. And I was happy. Why? Because while learning Angular, I actually made a couple of people my idols, or the people that I look up to. One of them was John Papa. He's still one of the people that I really admire a lot. And whenever I saw him, I was always in the awe of how he talked, how he walked, his body gestures, and his way of actually explaining the concepts so clearly that, even a beginner could understand. And I actually loved that particular part. And he was already a Google developers expert when this was happening. During the event, something happened. After the talks, the host basically said, all right, we have a particular task for you all, and we are going to give it to you, and we are going to give you some time to do it. There were a lot of people who were mentors. They were just roaming around in the conference. The conference was super cool. Those classic stairs stacking on top of each other. And I was sort of at the top, or almost at the top. And then we were all just starting to code, and everybody was excited. And I was really excited. I just wanted to finish that as soon as possible. And even though this was not really a competition, when I was done, I just instantly raised my hand and I was like, hey, I'm done with the task. And the host, Muhammad Umar Khan, who was standing on the stage, he basically said, come up here. And I was shocked, confused, nervous. I still remember going on the stage, being so nervous, the sweat coming down my palms, my heart racing. And I had to go on the stage to basically show how I did the task. But then, in just a bit, we had an applause happening. Everybody was applauding, and I was super interested on, why did that happen? And suddenly everything changed. There were about 100 developers in the room just applauding for me. And that was the best feeling ever. I did not plan for it. I did not expect it, but that basically happened. So just a bit about myself. I'm Mohammed Hassan. I'm a Google developers expert in Angular for the past 5 to 6 years. I'm also the head instructor and a software architect at SALT, School of Applied Technology in Stockholm, Sweden. And I'm also the author of the Angular Cookbook. If you're interested in the Angular Cookbook itself, you need to go to ng-cookbook.com, and you can wait for a month because my second book is coming out in December. Having the shameless pitch, let's talk about what happened after. So during this particular time, I was actually working on a really cool large-scale Angular project with Angular 2.0. I had juniors I was mentoring. I had this really cool app that I was architecting. I was feeling on the top of the world because I was creating these reusable components which were so easy to use and so cool that I was really, really proud of them. And those were the things that I would also talk to the other teams on, hey, this is how we should do things when it comes to web development, even though I had about an experience of 2.5 to 3 years back then. On this particular project, I worked for 2.5 years. You can imagine the scale of this project. But also, the features that were in this project were also the features which were not even in Facebook back then. Imagine events, groups, organizations not being in Facebook, but in this particular project. So I was super, super happy of having this large scale project to work on. It also brought a lot of technical challenges along the way and also provided me a lot of learning opportunities. And also I was leading the team. This is how I looked back then. You can see my love for the app that you see vaguely on the screen. It had maps and whatnot. So 2.5 years of efforts, but the end of it, the project never went live. And yeah, that is sad. So as a result, this is what happened. That was me when I was leaving the company. And I was like, okay, as a result, I had nothing to show for my 2.5 years of work where I can claim I did something cool. I led this team. But then how do I show that? How do I go to different interviews and say I have this immense experience of building cool things that nobody can see basically? So after my 2.5 years of work, I had nothing. But during those years, something amazing really happened. And I'm going to talk about what those were. That's when I actually started doing open source. So let's talk about some of my open source contributions throughout that particular year. We're talking about 2016 now. This is my first contribution ever that I made to open source. Let's have a look. I created a pull request against a project called Angular Timeline. I created an issue and then I also wrote a solution. I changed 9 different files. And then the organizer or the owner basically asked me to update something. And then immediately said, I'm going to do it myself. And then this PR was closed. But there was one fault from my end as well, because you can see this was October 4 and this is November 6. So I didn't really reply to that. So my first pull request, actual pull request, did not get accepted. Let's talk about my second pull request. Did not get accepted. I contributed to Angular Perfect scroll bar, had changes in 3 files, but then the organizer or the owner said, since we have already some pull requests that do the same thing, we're not probably gonna do that. And this was rejected or declined. The third one also got declined and did not make it. I made a few changes, but I did not add some tests to this. That was also a learning point for me because after all this conversation happened, this did not really end up in the project itself. And these were essentially some projects which had some traction. For example, 232 stars on GitHub is not a small deal. I usually say that if you get 100 stars on GitHub, it's like 1 million followers on Instagram, because almost nobody clicks this button. Almost nobody on GitHub. And if you're a developer, you can probably tell me in the comments if you have ever given a star to a GitHub repository or no. So just type yes or no, and then I'll know. So talk about my fourth contribution. There we go. This is the contribution that I did on the event that I talked about, the ng-conf extended, where this was the task that was given. And this is a pull request that I created against a particular project, but this was never meant to be merged. This was just for everyone else to show that they could work with Angular. And that's pretty much it. This is what I did for more than a year. If you look at my contributions from there, you'll see that I have created a lot of issues in different repositories, just creating issue. Created an issue here, created a pull request that never got merged. I've created this pull request that never got merged. So a lot of things never got merged really. But that really did not stop me. I found an interesting problem where I needed to work with Slack that had a bunch of emojis, but I wanted to do that in Angular. So I came up with this tiny little library called ng-2-emoji. This was for Angular version 2, 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, I think. It has 25 stars. Looks like some people actually used that. But it was as simple as just looking at your particular HTML, and if you are using any of those colon emoji colon thingy, it would just replace that with an actual emoji. To be honest, I did not really come up with the idea myself. I saw it somewhere else with jQuery or Angular 1, and I basically copied that. That was my first library ever. I don't think it's as useful, but it was something that people ended up using. But then later in November, something happened. With this project that did not give me any portfolio to show because it wasn't live, there was a demand of this project and we needed to do something special. Something that did not really exist. We needed to detect if our application is running on a mobile device or a desktop device. And that is when I actually started looking for it. I searched and searched on Google, but I did not find anything for Angular 2 Plus. I could, however, find this particular library. It was ng-device-detector, which was created for Angular 1. And when I looked at it, I looked at the stars. I was like, okay, 240 stars, not too bad. Issues, just one issue. Ooh, that's amazing. Because I usually see those when I'm using a library, and that means this library is really solid, not many issues. So I started digging into the code base of this one. It was not super complex. When I looked into it, it was using a bunch of libraries, a bunch of third-party libraries as well. So what did I do with this one? Just like a good software developer, I copy-pasted. That's what I get paid for the past 10 years. That's what I did. The change that I did was that I converted this from JavaScript to TypeScript, and then I essentially changed it to Angular 2. This is how it looks like today. However, if I open this, I can show you something special. First of all, this is a library that people started using over the years. The impact was not direct. It was not day one that people actually started using this library. It was quite a lot of time before it got some traction. Secondly, it still has below 500 stars on GitHub. If I open GitHub, you can see it still has 497. But the people that we have here might raise it to above 500. Who knows? I'm going to share the link in the chat anyways. One important thing that I want to share is not all the code in the repository is mine. I do not claim it. Because this is open source, a lot of it is actually contributed by other people. And especially even today, the latest release that we did for the Angular version 17, which was launched on November the 6th this year, I released a new version, but I did not contribute a single line of code to this update, to this release. It was this person who actually contributed it. So the beauty of open source is my career growth is now boosted by people who are contributing to open source projects that I created. And this is amazing because I don't have to do all the efforts. I'm giving to the community and the community gives back. And that is the awesome thing about being human. This repository recently has crossed 10 million installs on npm. If you go to the repository, you're going to find that badge right here because I made sure that it's there. 10 million. And only on GitHub, we have about 4,500 projects using this. So it's used by 4,500 projects, this library. I do not claim this is the most prominent library for Angular, but I think it's something significant. And on npm, we have almost 150,000 downloads for this library per week. This is amazing. And this is all due to the community that we have built around this library who uses it. And this, as I said, has had a great impact on my career because this is something that I can show as a number when needed. So this changed my perspective about open source in general. This changed a lot, to be honest. I started realizing a couple of things. One, I have been using so many cool libraries for free because they're open sourced. I've worked basically with projects of really cool people that I can look at the code at and learn myself how to code better, how to organize better, and then also maybe contributing as well. And when contributing to those projects, those big projects, just like small things even, I could see what is the standard that senior developers and architects work with. But one of the things that I noticed when I was looking at all the libraries during this era of working with that large scale project, and even after, is that I did not really see any repositories, any open source projects from Pakistan, where I'm from. And that was, to be honest, a bit sad. Because I started thinking, is it the reality that we are consumers of technology, but we are neither creating nor contributing to that? And I wanted to see more of the people around me to do that, because then I would have a lot of people to talk to about these things, about contributing, about the latest trends in Angular. And that was the moment when I decided to contribute more to open source and to spread the expertise that I had. This was not to gain something. This was not to gain more money. This was not to gain a better career, but this was basically to see more people involved in creating and contributing to the tech, more people, especially around me, in my city, in my country. But as I said, the goal was not to be consumers, but then creators and contributors as well. So I took the following steps. I started answering questions on Stack Overflow. This is something that we think only experts can do, but to be honest, anyone can jump in. I have known a lot of developers, a lot of junior developers even, who started doing this and really enjoyed, because when you go to Stack Overflow, you find some questions that are super basic. How do I concatenate two different arrays? Now, there might be duplicate questions, but you can still answer those questions. And if no one reports them, then you have the luxury to get reputation on Stack Overflow. And I think I stopped after getting about 1,300 or something reputation, but I know people have thousands and thousands of reputation points on Stack Overflow. That actually shows your expertise as well. And when you start giving those answers on Stack Overflow, my goal was to give answers, not to give the best answers. That also allowed me to get criticism, which were sometimes hurting. I was like, who's this guy telling me not to give my opinion like this? But that also, when I took it sort of positively, I actually learned a lot how to make my answers concrete, how to not just say things, but giving good examples along with that. And that goes not only with answering questions on Stack Overflow, but it's generally when you go and ask some people some questions. For example, when you have seniors, when you have a forum, when you try to go there, you try to be as explicit, as detailed as possible. One of my all-time favorite links that I share with everyone is this one. Don't-ask-to-ask.com. And everyone who's from my community right now in the chat, they know this one. And this basically is a site which is really simple, probably the most performant site on earth. And this basically says, if you have a question, please be more detailed. Don't ask any Java experts around because this entails a lot of problems like this. So I'm not going to go into details of this one, but just answering questions on Stack Overflow improved a lot of things that you can imagine. My ability to communicate things well, to communicate with examples, to communicate clearly, to understand the concept or understand the text that someone else has written, which means the questions, to also respond to the comments in a polite way, because Stack Overflow is sort of like Reddit. I mean, Reddit is more harsh, but Stack Overflow can be sometimes as well. But that also increased my ability to write, and that also contributed to tutorials. When I now create tutorials, I have all the experience that I've spent on Stack Overflow to write those. Another initiative that I came up was I convinced my company to make this part of our culture to contribute to open source. I was part of the team called MAJU. Now, I've been part of different teams in all the companies I've worked with, majorly in employee enhancements or employee programs. And this was one of the programs that I was responsible for. Even though I was not very senior in the company, I still was one of the core people who was driving the company's culture. And I made it sure that not only we have this culture that is sort of asking people to do it voluntarily, but then also it has some benefits for even more motivation when it comes to monetary values. For example, the yearly review that you have, if you can show that you did open source contributions, if you gave tech talks, if you did all of that or any of that, then yes, you have more reasons to get a raise because you're providing more value, not only to the company, but then outside the company as well. So I made sure that the environment that I have has something that has this open source contribution culture as common. And one of the books that I was reading recently was Atomic Habits. And I'm not sure if you have read that, but I also really liked this point where they said that if you want to do something, if you want to create a habit, you try to make your environment or you change your environment to something that has that particular habit as a norm. So you don't feel the stress to do it, or you don't feel that you need to put a lot of effort to do that because it's the norm. And this part really helped me because I was on the top to implement this, monitor this, but then also I had to lead an example by doing it myself. And then I started creating a lot of open source contributions. But just to be clear, open source contributions are not creating libraries, not contributing in terms of code to GitHub projects. But it's also, if you find an issue, you just create a GitHub issue for that. If you find a typo in a documentation, you just go there and create a pull request with that. And funnily, one of my major contributions to one of the biggest projects today is basically improving documentation. And that was Angular. So my first contribution to a big project was basically to improve a documentation. And it's really small contributions like this that count. When this happened, I also started giving talks at small conferences because, as I said, I wanted more people to contribute, to share their knowledge, to be the creators and contributors of tech. And trust me when I say this, those small conferences, a lot of them was just disasters. I failed miserably in demos quite a lot. Things did not really work. I also had issues with my slides sometimes not being completed or rehearsed. But then it got better over time. There were a few mishaps, but things got better. And then something happened. After giving a few talks in my local community, in my city, a person named Mashood reached out to me, Mashood Rastakar. He was running a consultancy firm, and then the company where I was before, where I had the 2.5 years project, I decided to switch from that company. And I decided it because I usually say that if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm probably in the wrong room. So I was giving a lot to my juniors, but I was not growing myself at any pace because I was involved in a lot of things and I was not technically challenged with the things that I had. So this guy reached out to me and he says, do you want to join my team? It's a startup, it's a small company, but we have really technically strong people and we're looking for more strong people like you. And funny enough, he got my recommendation from the person who was at the ng-conf extended as a host. The person, if you remember, who called me on stage and said, "Can you please show your code to the audience?" is the person who recommended myself to him. Now, it could be that he remembered me from the conference. I don't know. But it could also be that I also had an interview with that person in his company as well, and he really liked me. So it could be either of those. I don't really know. But small things like this, when you see it backwards in the past, you start connecting all those dots. What is the significance of this person? He actually was planning to apply for this cool program called the Google Developers Expert. I did not even know what that means. I didn't know the term at all. And then I thought to myself, can I become one too? I think I'm pretty decent at Angular. And then when I thought about it for a long time, I got to a conclusion and my brain said, yes, why not? So I basically consulted him. I asked him, what is the process? How are you trying to apply for this? And he mentioned to me what his plan was. He was planning to create a Google Sheet listing all of his impact, his contributions, sort of making a really good case for him to be accepted into the program. So Mashood asked me at the moment, because I was too excited, that I said, can you please recommend me to the program? And he basically said no, but in a polite way. He said that I should spend more time in building up a really good case for myself and sort of having a portfolio. And I remember it was about October or September when I asked him. And he said that right now, a lot of people are actually applying and there's a second round coming in April next year. So that's when you can apply. And this program, no one can actually go and apply for themselves. It's usually a Googler who works at Google or another expert who can basically recommend you for this particular program. So he said, take more time, build your portfolio. And then after a while, when I did all of that, I went and gave talks to some conferences. I started giving workshops, really small workshops. I remember on my first workshop, there were just 7 people. And out of those, only 3 knew Angular and what I was going to talk about. And it was an advanced Angular talk and everyone else did not know Angular at all. So the start was pretty shaky, but I was more interested in getting things done and not the amount of people who come in, even though if it was important. I started documenting all of that into a Google Sheet. And if you're listening to what I'm saying, anyone can become a Google developer expert if they really go through this path. If they try to document all of their changes and then can show they're an expert, you can go to Google or have someone nominate you and then they take interviews. And then if you're accepted, yeah, you're a GD. It's not that difficult, but you need to be an expert from the get-go. So when that happened, I actually got an email from Google that I've been nominated and I should fill a form that should contain my impact for the past 3 years. By the way, this is also the time when I actually started my YouTube channel. And it was like super small. I have no subscribers whatsoever. Back then, when I started creating some tutorial videos, I also listed those in my document. And then I took about, I think, 1.5 hours to actually fill that whole form. Even though the numbers were not really great, they were significant in terms of having the ng2 emoji library, having the ngx-device-detector. That was also something that was gaining some popularity as well. And then I had written a bunch of articles as well on Medium. I combined all of those things and then I showed to Google via this form that I have the expertise that it takes to be a GD. So then, after a couple of interviews, I met Stephen Fluen. If you don't know who he is, he used to be the DevRel person or the person who's the face of Angular back then. And he was from the Angular's core team at Google. Now imagine working on a framework from day one of your career, being so, I wouldn't say obsessed, but attached to it that you start loving it and then you grow your career on it. So it has a really important significance in your career itself. And then meeting a person from the creator of that framework. You can imagine my emotions, my overwhelming emotions back then. I know I was sweating, I was shaking, and that was an interview, of course, by someone who knows how Angular was created, for me, who now needs to prove that I know Angular. So even though this was a remote talk, it was tough, but I was able to answer the questions that he asked. And then there was a long wait. They said that the process can take from 1 month to 3 months. And I was just waiting. I was checking my email every single day, just waiting. And then one day, this happened. I got the email that said, "Hey Essen, congratulations on successfully passing the last step of the assessment. And now you are a Google Developers Expert. Just signed the NDA and you're good to go." And this was the moment I remember that I screamed the most in my life. I was happy. I was on the top of the world. The emotions were mixed with happiness, with being proud of myself that I've achieved something. And I think just the dopamine level was up there. I don't think I can explain that in words, what I felt, but I hope you understand how I was feeling. But you know what happened right after? It was silence. I felt hollow. The question that came to my mind was, all right, I've been working for 8 months on this thing. I've achieved it. What's next? And now that I think about it the more, I realize that this is essentially how we humans work. We chase a goal and we think that that is the ultimate thing that we want in our lives. Whether it's money, whether it's career, whether it's getting the Google Developers Expert title. But when you achieve it, there's this emptiness, there's this hollowness. Like, what am I supposed to do now? What's my aim? And the reality is that you need a bigger goal. You need something that is sustainable, that keeps you motivated. Now, I often say this, that there's no one else that's going to come and put motivation in my brain. It's going to be me, myself, who's going to motivate myself. And also for that, I need cues. I need reasons for that. And if I don't have a bigger goal, a goal that can never have a deadline, so to say, that you can't ever say this is done. If you have that goal, then you can be more focused, you can be more motivated, and this is something that won't ever have that hollowness. So I needed a bigger goal. I was done with being a GDE. And the goal that I moved towards was the same as when I started open source. I forgot about it during the whole process. But I reminded myself that the reason why I started to do open source was to enable more of the people around me to create, to contribute to open source. I also started doing all of this to make lives easier for the others. If I'm facing a technical challenge, whether it's with a programming language or a framework or a library or a tutorial, I don't want the next person to go through the same difficulty. I want to make it easier for them. And that is the goal that I took. That is also the goal that I transformed or wrote or sort of concised into. I need to be an educator. When you have a goal that is something that should happen, you're focusing on the outcome. If you don't get the outcome, you're demotivated. And that's not what I wanted. I shifted my focus to something else. And I unconsciously, or not unconsciously, but subconsciously did that. And when I read books now, I realize that I've been subconsciously doing the same things that people recommend in the books. For example, Atomic Habit also talks about it. And the formula that I took, without realizing it's a formula, is I thought about myself, my identity, on what I need to be or what I want to be rather than what I want to achieve. I want to be someone who contributes to open source. I want to be an educator. I want to be someone who does charity in terms of education. I'm a Muslim, and the only things that can help Muslims, according to scholars and books, or the three things that come to your benefit is one, if you're educating someone, that goes forever and ever, as long as that person is benefiting from it. The second one is charity. As long as the charity goes on, if you build, I don't know, a school, as long as people study from that school and they pass on the knowledge forward, you get a reward for the afterlife. And the third one is if you have a pious offspring, if you have children who are pious, who are connected to the Creator and do good deeds. So I need to cover at least one of them. Monetary needs a lot of money if I want to do charity. Education is something I can do. That is what I've basically had as my goal for years. So when I create videos now, and now we have about 15,000 YouTube subscribers, we have now 20,000 Facebook followers. And as much as I hate to talk about these numbers, unfortunately, these numbers is what get people excited. I think about 5,000 on TikTok. I hate the platform. We have about 7,000 or something on Instagram as well. But the idea is the more people I can educate, the more happy I feel, because that is something I can take with myself, that, okay, I'm achieving something. That also takes care of one really important thing that you might have heard of, the imposter syndrome. It's common. Everybody feels that. And the reality is that only the people who are skilled feel that. If someone is not skilled, they're not going to feel like, oh, I'm probably here by mistake. It's probably luck. I don't really deserve. No, they would not, because they would not be there. But if you're skilled, you often think like, I might be here by just mistake. I'm being a fraud. I don't really know all of this stuff. And this is something that I face all the time. But these things, educating people, getting their feedback, going to conferences, talking to you folks, is something that gives me courage that I am on the right track. I am doing good. And I have the skills. That's why people are saying that my content helped them. And this really makes it easy if you do what's on the screen. That's what I've been doing since then. Small wins and celebrating them. If you know me for a long time, you know that I've said this quite a lot of times, that even if I do a really small thing, I talk about it. I share that on social media. This is also for sharing knowledge, first of all, but then also to tackle this imposter syndrome as well. So I don't really have that haunting me that I don't know anything, or I'm probably here by mistake, or I'm a fraud or something. So sharing small wins, whether you have created a really small pull request that has fixed a typo, celebrate it. If you have created a project that doesn't work, but you have created it and deployed it on GitHub pages, celebrate it. Share it with your friends. There will be people who will criticize you. There will also be people who will criticize you in a positive manner to help you grow. Find a mentor, discuss with them. But don't forget to celebrate your small wins. How do you celebrate it? You basically tell your loved ones about your achievements. That is the first step I would do. I would talk to my wife. I would talk to my mother. And I would share with them, this is what happened. For example, if we have graduates from SALT, where I teach as a head instructor, I talk to my family about them. Like, these many people graduated, this person actually created this cool project. And it's so amazing to see that only in 3 months they could do that. Now, I basically have nothing that I've done to contribute to that. I mean, some maybe, but majority of it is they actually went through the bootcamp and they built them stuff. I mean, there's little contribution from my side, but even that really gives me joy and then makes the others happy as well. So those sort of hormones that we have in our brains, we talk about oxytocin, we can talk about dopamine, we can talk about endorphins, but all of them, when you try to have conversations with the people you trust, They can be your family, they can be your friends. And if you don't really care about criticism from social media, just post there, because I really don't. When I often tell this to my developers that when I'm having a really good day, I just go and post on Reddit, and then I get all the hate. Or I play Dota 2. So that's the most toxic environment ever. So I've built a tolerance of getting all that negative comments, but then also not just thinking everything is negative, but also picking positive criticism from that as well. If someone says your content sucks, I would ask, can you be more specific on how I can improve? Because just saying your content sucks doesn't really make sense. So that's what I would suggest you to do. Start sharing on social media if you feel confident, or with your family and friends. So since then, I've been celebrating small wins, and I think that is essentially the way to go. If you're wondering how to start contributing to open source, the easiest way I can tell you is the mindset should not be that I'm contributing to a big project. I'm contributing to something that has a large number. That's not the idea. The idea is you are someone who is going to be someone that contributes to open source. Have that sort of mindset. Attach it with your identity. You are someone who loves to share knowledge. You are someone who loves to contribute. It doesn't really matter then if you're contributing to a big project or a small project. It doesn't matter. You're helping someone. And in result, you're gaining something secondary. I've never had this sort of mindset to contribute having monetary outcomes. I've had people in my family asking me, why am I going to conferences? Are they paying me? So a lot of conferences I paid myself for the travel and everything, but I went there first to have a feeling of satisfaction that I'm contributing. And then also I know that as a secondary result, sometimes you get the results, you get the benefits, you get monetary gains. So all this, when I did that, all open source contributions, I did not get any money for that. But in the long run, it paid off. It paid off for Google, recognizing me as a Google developers expert. After my first company, I never had to apply for any particular job at all. I feel blessed. I think I think it's not me who is responsible for all of that. It's just me being blessed. But these things contributed at some point. And then people reached out to me. And I usually say this to the developers as well, that often there's someone on LinkedIn reaching out to me just because I post about small stuff that I do. I did this, I did that. Just keep doing this. And I think if you do it for the sake of sharing information, and that's your mindset, I think that's really good. If you try to do it for example, if I spend 1 month sharing knowledge every day in the hope of finding a job, then if I'm not getting enough responses, I will get demotivated right away. That's what happens. If my goal is I need to be someone who shares knowledge every day, doesn't matter what happens, then it's really, really likely that I will hook up into LinkedIn algorithm, people would start reaching out to me, and I will build a following or something. So I hope you understand the mindset. And this is the mindset I've followed and I've seen results for myself. That's pretty much it for today. The easiest way to get a contribution is just searching on GitHub in the language that you prefer. If you want a detailed video, write in the comments. I can try to make it on YouTube. If you want to find me on YouTube, the URL is Code with SN. So if you go to youtube.com/code with SN, you can essentially find a lot of good tutorials there as well. But I don't have one at the moment that specifically talks about how to contribute to open source. Maybe I can create one. But imagine having some random guy on YouTube who has a small project that they're trying to work on and they need help. If you are even a tiny bit experienced, you can just help them out with one issue. That's a contribution that you have given. Even if it's not a famous project, share on GitHub. Share that this was my first contribution for today, or this was my first contribution ever. Just share that. And then also help that person. For example, if they're really, really new, you can help them to, for example, deploy their project. You're actually helping someone being more productive, being more competent as well. So if that's your idea, that's your goal, that's your mindset, I think there's no stopping you. So that's all I wanted to share today. I wanted to share about how open source basically changed my life, my mindset, my approach towards being a software developer, and how it actually contributed to the growth of my career. Even though open source itself was something that initiated everything, but I think it was the mindset, it was the experience, it was all the criticism that I got from a lot of people, and then just the fact that I kept trying and never stopped and never looked into why am I not getting the results in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. I never looked into it. I think that's what made it really smooth for me. So I think now I'm gonna stop talking and I'm going to answer any questions that you might have. Hey there. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more videos to come. And if you've watched this far, you've actually taken the first step of contributing to open source because you've shown that you are interested. If you're interested for me having a video that shows how to start contributing to open source with the minimal effort as possible, write in the comments that I want that video and then I'll make sure to create one. With that said, YouTube thinks that you're gonna love this video, so give it a go and I'm gonna see you in the next video.